Amen. Good morning, y'all. My name's Will. I'm one of the pastors here. It's good to be with you this morning. Now, in the book of Deuteronomy, when Moses stands on the edge of the promised land, Moses, who has stood on many a mountain, just like the mountains from our women's retreat yesterday, Moses stands on the edge of the promised land. And these people that he has walked with all this time, a new generation that will enter the promised land. Moses, in making his farewell statements, farewell sermon speech to them, who's called them to remember everything they've been through together and wants them to know, this is what God has told me to tell you, that this is the commandment. This is what you need to live in the promised land, a land overflowing with milk and honey. He tells them this in Deuteronomy 6 and verse 4. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. Above anything else, when the people are getting ready to enter into a new land, Moses tells them, this is what you need above all. This is the commandment above all. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. Our Jewish friends call this the Shema prayer. The word hear in Hebrew, Old Testament originally written in Hebrew, hear, O Israel, that's the word Shema. Practicing Orthodox Jews pray this prayer still morning and evening every day. There is something essential about this prayer that helps people connect with it, and there is something wrong with my tablet. All right, well, we'll see if we can pray some prayers over that, or else we're going to get it from memory. So, when Moses stands on the edge of the promised land and gives them this word, says there's going to be other statutes and decrees and all of that. You've already had some of those, but hear it. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord alone. And what your job is, what our job is as a people seeking to live into the promised land, our response is to love God with everything you have. So thousands of years later, when a man named Jesus of Nazareth shows up on the scene, and they start asking him questions, something we always like to point out about Jesus is that Jesus gets asked all kinds of different questions. All kinds. Many questions he doesn't even answer. Many questions he answers mysteriously in parable form and things like that. Many times Jesus answers a question with a question, right? But when they ask him, hey, what's the most important thing? Jesus does not hesitate. Here it is in Mark 12. One of the teachers of the law came and heard them debating, and noticing that Jesus had given them a good answer, he asked him, of all the commandments, which is the most important? The most important one, answered Jesus, is this. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. And the second is this, love your neighbor as yourself, which he's also not making up on the fly. That's from Leviticus. There is no commandment greater than these. I'm going to casually pull out my phone while I'm talking to you here and see if I can get my notes to work on my phone. I'm not texting anyone, just standing here casually saying, hey, that's going to work. All right, let's do it that way. Now, Jesus, who answers almost nothing clearly and definitively, gives a definitive answer to this one because the answer to that question is the same it's been for thousands of years. The answer to the question in Jesus' day from the religious leaders and in range, in earshot of his disciples to hear it is the same as it was for the people on the edge of the promised land, and that gives me great hope that it's the same as it is for you and me today. When we ask, where do we start? I think here is a good place. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And in response, Love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength, with all you are. If you're new with us, this is our first sermon in a new series called Believe, where we are walking through all of this fall 12 sermons based on the historic Nicene Creed. The Nicene Creed celebrates its 1700th anniversary this year, is largely unchanged, almost entirely unchanged in 17 centuries, and is the core statement of belief for Christians, Methodist, Baptist, Lutheran, Catholic, Pentecostal, you name it. We are held together when we ask the question, what do Christians believe? The most straightforward and the most unifying answer to that question is the Nicene Creed. And the first words of the Nicene Creed are, we believe in one God. Now, we're going to talk more about the Nicene Creed as we walk through this series over these weeks, and we'll talk about, specifically when we talk about Jesus, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about Jesus. This is still church. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about Jesus in this creed as well. So we'll talk about particular things they debated and things they wanted clarity on. If you want more information on the Nicene Creed, we did an introduction to it a couple weeks ago. You can find on our podcast and on YouTube. There's this sense when we say, okay, where does it start? It starts with saying, we believe in one God. There is a sense for some of us, maybe, and maybe some of you, if you've been part of church for a long time. For some of us, we could say, well, yeah, of course. Like, what's next? We believe in one God. Got it, great. I obviously don't believe in 10 gods. We just believe in one. All right, let's move on to the next thing. So there can be some sense of, yeah, well, that, of course, makes sense. Why do we even need to spend time talking about it? But the temptation today for us, I don't think, is necessarily believe in a kind of pantheistic, here's 27 gods as opposed to one God. The temptation today can be a bit of, well, like we don't know what to believe about anything. And as we shared a couple weeks ago, the difference for us today is there are so many different places we can take these questions. So many different avenues we could pursue to say, okay, well, what really do we believe? One thing we always like to say, especially when we talk about theology, is that it is vitally important to make sure that our theology is as much invitation as it is proclamation. It is vitally important to believe that our theology is as much invitation as it is proclamation. Because if we the church, just stand up and say, here's what we believe, get in or get out, that hasn't worked so well in the recent past. And the truth is, it's always been the case that those people standing on the edge of the promised land, they've got questions. They may not be taking them to ChatGPT or various other places to try to get the answers. But those people are unsure. Their parents were slaves in Egypt. They don't know what it's like to be free either. They look around and they're unsure. And what God tells Moses to tell them above all is the same thing Jesus affirms thousands of years later when he's asked what is most important, which is why we start here together today to say, hear it, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. If you've been in church a long time, sometimes we can skip to the love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength part. But it starts, and Jesus includes, hear it, Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Any good theology starts not with you and me, but with God. Any theology that starts with you and me is digging in the wrong place, right? Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. The truth is, even whatever the state of Christianity today or the way things have changed, there's so many different places we can take these questions. The truth is, whatever studies you can find about how many or how fewer people say they believe in Jesus or Christianity or the God of the Bible or whatever the case may be, the truth is almost everyone, at least almost all Americans, something like 90% of Americans believe that there is something bigger going on. Almost everyone, at least almost all Americans, believe that there is something happening in this world, in creation, in this thing that is beyond our capability to fully understand it, to comprehend it, to control it. The starting point for any religion, is something bigger is happening here. And when we talk about, as Christians, as a church, when we talk about that something bigger, we want to make sure we're talking about it with as much invitation as we are proclamation. We want to make sure we get it right, which is why we take those questions 1,700 years ago and say, okay, this is what Christians have believed for 17 centuries. It's what holds us all together. No new truth. But we also want to make sure we say, hey, this truth is good news. And this land is abundant in milk and honey. And what you're going to need to be there more than anything else is, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with everything you have. When we say it can be, we can say, yeah, one God, okay, well, that's no big deal. Sometimes it's easy for us, or easy for me to assume, that monotheism, a belief in one God, came first, and polytheism, a belief in many gods, came later. Sometimes it just makes sense to us to think, okay, well, yeah, first they believed in one, and then many is more than one, so others got added and all that stuff. But really what we think is that polytheism came first, and monotheism is a new idea. And the reason why is because in a world with very little science and very little ways to account for data and no ways to communicate with other people, other cultures, and all of that, rudimentary religion became the answer to so many questions. What is that big ball of fire in the sky? I don't know, it must be the sun god. Why does it rain sometimes and sometimes it doesn't, right? Must be the god of the weatherman up there letting us know, because they don't have Doppler. They can't check and see. Why does my harvest, why is it so full some years and some years not? Why can she get pregnant but I can't? All of these things just kind of naturally, organically over time end up becoming this God and the God of this and the God of that and all of that stuff. And the truth is, while that may seem strange to us, not only would it have been more common for them to believe in many gods, there's also a personal component to it. Because if you were a farmer and you had a good harvest, you were blessed. And in those cultures, you would have been blessed by not just any God of the harvest, but your God of the harvest, Powell's God of the harvest, right? If you wanted children and you got them, it wasn't just any fertility goddess, it was your fertility goddess. There was a deeply personal component to it, and we know much about that because think about how much we love our stuff. Think about how much we love our teams, right? We beat a team from Johnson City yesterday, and a lot of y'all are wearing orange this morning, right? We love when good things happen to our teams. This is church. You shouldn't lie in church. I'm kind of enjoying it when bad things happen to teams I don't like, right? So are you. Unless you're a better Christian than me, which is entirely possible. So we know this bit. It's not just, even though it can be hard for us to understand, as if you've been in the church a long time, if polytheism was the standard and those gods were local, they were yours, and when good things happened, it was accredited to them. That's the way it was. If we put sports aside for a second, think about what would be the gods and goddesses of Powell, right? You want to know where my kids worship multiple times a week? It's at the Weigels. The God of Broadacres, right? At the Weigels, they come and take an offering, my offering, multiple times a week and spend it there. They're rewarded with their favorite versions of milk and honey, right, from this place. We live over by the Weigels that'll even baptize your car these days. And so, there is this sense of the things that are local to us are more valuable. This is my second go-round being the pastor in a community where a dairy farm was a big part of things. My wife, Alex, is from Athens, and where Mayfield Dairy is, and I was the pastor of that, or associate pastor of that church for a little bit. Scotty Mayfield was actually in our church. Scotty, whenever I would say how much I hate bananas, Scotty would always say, it's the number one selling flavor of popsicles. I would always say, something is wrong with your research. But we used to say, like in Athens, especially if you're from a smaller town, and I know Powell may feel like a smaller town, but we're obviously Knoxville, Knox County adjacent. If you're from a small town that's not adjacent to a larger metropolitan area, think about how much those things, those local gods and goddesses, mean to your community. And then think about a point in time where travel and communication, you don't know much about what's down the road. You can't learn about halls by driving in your car a few minutes down the road and then coming and seeing it, but you hear about them. And you hear, oh, I don't know, like they've got this or they got that. When we were in Athens, where Maggie, the Mayfield cow, is the goddess of Athens, right down the road from Athens is Cleveland, Tennessee, where they make M&Ms. And if you can imagine in that culture and context, for us, we might say, oh man, do you know what goes great is milk and M&Ms. Those things go great together, right? But if we're back in the way back, you don't trust those M&Ms. Some of them have peanuts inside and some of them don't. Like you don't trust those guys. And it would have been and is, and you can read about this all through the Old Testament, much, much, much easier to say, hey, you better stay over there. Because if you come over here, they may melt in your mouth, but they will melt in the hands of our gods, right? Like, it would have been much easier to just fight it out, which is exactly what happens, and a bit of what Israel is told they will run into when they cross into the promised land themselves. Polytheism would have been the standard, and those gods were personal, man. They were yours. They were your town's gods. And so into all of that steps this God, who doesn't, I hate that phrase, God doesn't step into anything. God is always there. Sometimes I catch myself when we say things like, and then Jesus showed up. And I'm like, where do you think he was the whole time exactly? But into all that, these people come to the edge of the promised land. And Moses tells them, here's what you're going to need more than anything else. And yes, your part is love. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. We're going to talk a little more about that next week as we get to that section of it. But Moses says, your part first is hear it, remember it, write it on your hands and your door frames and all that. Hear it, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Because this idea, there's a great commentary written on this, and I could not find the name of the person who said this originally, but this idea that going from polytheism to monotheism is not like subtracting 1 from 2. It's not like saying, well, now there were many and now it's not a numerical difference. This idea in a culture and context where gods are local and they're personal, they're yours. This idea that there is one God who is above it all, who is a creator, who has no equal, who has no mate, who has no rival, because God and the devil do not, in an Eastern religion kind of sense, God and the devil are not in a yin-yang relationship here. This is not a 50-50 proposition. No equal, no mate, no rival. It's God who made everything and has done all of these miracles and is over it all. And also, by the way, knows you even more personally than all of those gods you think do. And is for you even more personally than all those gods you think are. That's the revolution. In that culture, on that mountain, monotheism is the revolution. To say, no, all of these things that you think there are, no, it's one. And your response, our response, my response, same as in Jesus' day, same as all those things, our response is one God. Our response is to love the one God. For the people on the edge of the promised land who don't know what they're doing and they can't ask their parents about it because their parents haven't been in the promised land either, it's love God with all you have. For the religious leaders in Jesus' day who are asking, okay, well, what's the most important commandment? What is it? This sacrifice? Is it this? Is it all of these boxes that I need to make sure I check? And is Jesus even going to answer this question? It's no, there's one. There's one, and your response is to love. And for us today, when we don't know what we don't know, and we don't know where to ask, and all of these things, and there is a sea of information here, where we start when we ask, what do we believe, is the same place they started 1,700 years ago and has not changed. And all this noise and all of this sea and all of this beauty and all of this strife and all that, there is one thing. We like to say, because we're going to get to Jesus and all this good stuff, we like to say that Jesus is at the center of everything. But for the purposes of today, it's God, for one thing to be at the center of everything. And our response to that is love. Love God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind. You love God with all you have. Jesus later is going to say, love each other the way I love you, which is an even higher standard. But I think there's still truth for us in saying, this is a come as you are church. You love God with all you have. And so the question for us at the start of this is about oneness. Are our lives centered around a oneness? Or am I, man, so busy, so scattered, so stressed that I feel pulled in so many different directions? When the New Testament writers talk about the opposite of peace, it is this sense of being pulled in so many different directions. But the word from the beginning is about oneness and bringing this back. The writer of Ephesians affirmed this. Those words we just sang a few minutes ago come from this passage in Ephesians 4. Make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. There is one body and one Spirit, just as you were called to one hope when you were called. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is over all and through all and in all. So this isn't just an Old Testament idea. This is the idea. Let me show it to you in the Message. This is Eugene Peterson's contemporary paraphrase. Same passage we just read. You were all called to travel on the same road and in the same direction. Stay together, both outwardly and inwardly. You have one master, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who rules over all, works through all, and is present in all. Everything you are, and everything you think, and everything you do is permeated with capital O, oneness. I like that very much. Because when we ask where do we start, we can be pulled in 17 million different directions. And maybe what we, in our busy, crazy lives in 2025, need to hear the same thing that they needed to hear in Jesus' day, which is the same thing they celebrated at the Council of Nicaea in 325, and the same thing that Moses told those people on the edge of the Promised Land thousands of years before. This is the commandment. And don't skip ahead to the love part. Hear it. Remember it. The Lord our God, the Lord is one. Because of that, your job, my job, our first move, what we need to live in the Promised Land is to love this God with everything we got. And when we feel like what we got ain't very much, you love him with that. Part of what a church is for is to surround ourselves and each other with the opportunity to grow in this thing together. We're going to take communion 3 times in this series. We celebrate communion here on the first Sunday of every month. So we're going to take communion today. And then we'll take communion the Sunday we talk about Jesus being human. And then we'll take communion the first Sunday in November when we talk about Jesus coming again. There are all these different points of intersection in this series. But each time, I'm going to try to say what we always try to say, no new truth, is you bring you. You love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. The question to begin is, how is my life, or how much of my life, is oriented around oneness? Or maybe, have I put something else in the center? And as we talked about this spring when we talked about Jesus as king, the thing you are most likely to put in the center is you. The thing I am most likely to put in the center is me. But any good theology doesn't start with us. It starts with the one who is above all and in all and through all. No equal, no mate, no rival. Who gathers a group of people and says, this land is abundant in milk and honey. Listen, hear it. Don't forget. The Lord our God, the Lord is one. And you, in response, and me, you love the Lord with whatever you got.